The word revolution, of course, means what? It means transformation. It means change. When one considers from any objective perspective the condition of African American people in this country, if you didn't find the need to change that condition for the better, then your interest was to keep things as they were, to preserve the status quo. If you look at the condition of African Americans today, we're at the bottom of every social indicator, you see, in terms of our educational attainments, in terms of our work incomes, in terms of our life expectancy, in terms of our health. Every indicia of social well-being and status. Why are we at the bottom of those lists? So I would say that it isn't a reality that could be isolated in 1970. It is a reality that continues up to this day. Revolution is a necessity. Change is necessary to change a situation that is deadly to us.
An atmosphere of anger and mistrust prevailed 6 months after the shooting as Jamal was brought to trial before Philadelphia Common Pleas Judge Albert Sabo. Known locally as the hanging judge, Sabo has handed down more death sentences than any other judge in America, and all but 2 of them to non-whites. Conflict between Sabo and Jamal arose almost immediately.
I think his defiant and highly arrogant conduct was quite early evident. That was in pretrial motions months before the trial. He cursed out a judge during the course of pretrial motions several months before, and this was a different judge, several months before that. It was from the very beginning that he had reacted in the way that he did because he felt things weren't going his way. That was indeed his problem. I'm sure over the years he's somewhat settled. There were 3 judges that were involved in that case. 1 for the preliminary hearing and pretrial motions, 1 for the trial, and the Supreme Court justice came down. He criticized verbally and directly in indignant and very, very critical ways, all of them. He just couldn't contain himself. And then he abused the jury. Of course he tried to abuse me, but then he abused the judge probably most of all. Because of his inability to control himself, he convicted himself. If the evidence didn't convict him, he convicted himself. But in his case, both did.
The disorganized and fragmented defense did little to attack the prosecution's case. Defense counsel Anthony Jackson, acting without his client's cooperation, merely brought forward character witnesses to testify to Jamal's gentle nature. He was unable even to produce William Cook, who had been charged with assault but subsequently disappeared, to testify on his brother's behalf. In the end, the jury convicted Mumia Abu-Jamal of first-degree murder on July 2, 1982. The next day, the 12-person team, composed of 10 whites and 2 blacks, voted to impose on Jamal the ultimate penalty, death by electrocution. While all appeals failed, Jamal looked for new legal counsel. In 1991, he founded and defense attorney Leonard Weinglass, renowned trial counsel in such cases as the Chicago 7 and the Pentagon Papers, who has never lost a capital case.
And the United States Supreme Court has said that in this country, we do not try people on the basis of their political pasts. So you cannot introduce into evidence their politics, their ideology, their political associations, or their political statements. That was done in Mumia's case. It was done to great effect. We believe, and I think it's true, that he got the death penalty because of the reference to his political background and his political history. And so it should be reversed on that ground. The jury was unconstitutionally selected. The prosecutor made 2 unconstitutional arguments. one informing the jury that they might not be imposing the death penalty, and the other informing the jury of Mumia's political background, plus a number of other factors that are also germane to the case, but we feel we have a very strong case on the law and the facts on each of those.
Weinglass's team, perhaps the first competent legal representation Jamal has ever received, have uncovered ample new evidence suggesting Jamal was wrongly convicted.
Well, the worst thing that can happen to anyone who's in the criminal justice system as a defendant in the United States is to be isolated and alone and without a support network. There you're talking about almost all. Usually poor, undereducated, without family, usually without friends also. That's the worst thing that can happen to anyone, because they don't get funds, they don't get effective attorneys, their plight is not brought to the public attention, and they by and large go quickly and quietly. The best thing that can happen to anyone is to be rich, because number one, they're not prosecuted, and or famous, because if they're famous, there is public attention. Mumia has achieved fame through his writing, through media attention, and that unquestionably serves him well. However, it doesn't give him an open road, because of all the people on death row, Mumia is the only one who has a funded, resourced campaign by people to see to it that he is executed, namely the Fraternal Order of the Police, which is very powerful, has a lot of money, and has chapters nationwide, and they have targeted Mumia. So he has support, and the media has been very important in that, and he has opposition. The two sides collide on this case. His fame is, at best, a balancing factor, and it doesn't necessarily guarantee a result. If we lose in court, the final decision whether Mumia lives or dies is made by one person who has no guidelines, no standards. It's just a flat-out, unquestioned decision, and it's the governor of Pennsylvania. And presumably, he makes it on a political basis. I don't think he cares that Nelson Mandela, the European Parliament, the Foreign Minister of Belgium, the former President of Germany, 20 members of the Diet in Japan have all written, as well as thousands in the United States and labor unions. I think for Governor Ridge, the bottom line is who votes in Pennsylvania and who is he beholden to. That pretty much falls on the side of the Fraternal Order of the Police and against Mumia.
Mumia, some would say you have the best of all possible worlds being in the United States. Go anywhere else in the world and you won't find it as good as you find it here.
Well, on some level, Alan, that's probably true. It's certainly true that that is the law as it is written. The question is not what the law says, but what the law does. What the law is in application, not in this theoretical, formulation. In the very real world, in a city of Philadelphia with perhaps 45% African American population, many people, like myself on death row, have had an overwhelmingly white jury determine guilt, innocence, life, or death. The U.S. Supreme Court has said countlessly, you can't do that. Well, they did that. They did it in my case, they did it in a number of people's cases. It appears you can do that because it happens every day.